The voice memo arrived at 11:47 p.m. while Gavin Lake was pulling his coworker from the sparking remains of a blown transformer. Static crackled through his phone speaker as he pressed it to his ear, hands still trembling from the adrenaline of nearly watching Dave get electrocuted. The message had come from Sabrina's number, but the audio was garbled, distorted by what sounded like poor reception or deliberate manipulation. "Never has to know," came through clearly, followed by breathless laughter. Then moaning, soft, intimate sounds that made his stomach drop. The recording cut off abruptly. Gavin stared at the phone screen in the harsh fluorescent light of the substation control room. Received 47 minutes ago. Right around the time his wife should have been finishing her late grant meeting with Noel Mercer, he deleted the message without saving it. 3 hours later, Gavin pulled into his driveway in suburban Portland. The house was dark, except for the porch light Sabrina always left on. Their 16-year-old son Jasper's room glowed blue from his computer screen. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. Inside, Sabrina was already in bed, reading on her tablet. She looked up when he entered, her expression shifting to concern. "God, you look terrible. What happened?" "Transformer blew. Dave almost got fried." Gavin sat on the edge of the bed, studying her face. "How was your meeting?" "Exhausting." Noel had all these new environmental impact projections for the Riverside development. We went over everything twice. She set down the tablet. "I'm sorry you had a rough night." Gavin nodded, noting how easily the explanation rolled off her tongue. "Too easily. Did you call me around 11? No, why?" "Thought I might have missed a call. My phone died around 10. I had to borrow Noel's charger." She reached over to touch his arm. "Come to bed. You look exhausted." But Gavin was looking at her wrist, where a delicate gold bracelet caught the lamplight. He'd never seen it before. "That's pretty. New?" Sabrina glanced down, and for just a moment, her composure flickered. "Oh, this old thing? Found it in my jewelry box. Must have forgotten about it." Another lie. Gavin knew every piece of jewelry his wife owned. He'd helped pick out most of them during their 18 years of marriage. "I'm going to grab some water," he said, standing. "Long night?" In the kitchen, Gavin opened his laptop and pulled up their joint credit card statements. Nothing unusual in the past month. But the bracelet looked expensive, probably custom. If Noel had bought it for her, he would have paid cash. Gavin worked for Pacific Power as a senior safety engineer, specializing in high-voltage systems. His job required meticulous attention to detail, the ability to trace problems through complex networks, and above all, patience. Electrical systems failed gradually, then all at once. You had to watch for the warning signs. The next morning, Sabrina left early for her office at Green Future Northwest. The nonprofit she ran focused on sustainable urban development. Gavin called in sick and drove to the cellular store. "I need to recover a deleted voicemail," he told the technician, a young woman with purple hair. "My wife accidentally erased something important from my phone." "Are you on a family plan?" "Yes, I'm the primary account holder." It took 40 minutes, but they retrieved the message. This time Gavin listened with earbuds, isolating each sound. The static wasn't random. It was rhythmic, like bedsheets. The woman's voice was definitely Sabrina's, though the words were fragmented. "Told Clara he'd never has to know about." Then came Noel's voice, deeper, clearer. "Your husband's too busy playing with his power lines to notice." The rest was unmistakably intimate. Gavin sat in his truck in the parking lot, listening to the message 3 more times. His hands were steady. That was the thing about electrical work. You learned to stay calm when everything around you was dangerous. He drove to his office at the Pacific Power Regional Headquarters. The building was mostly empty on a weekday morning, just a skeleton crew monitoring the grid. Gavin had access to sophisticated surveillance and data recovery equipment, tools designed to investigate electrical theft and equipment tampering. In his lab, he connected Sabrina's phone to his computer using a forensic cable. The device was encrypted, but Gavin had learned a few tricks over the years. He'd testified as an expert witness in fraud cases involving tampered meters and stolen power. Digital forensics was part of his job. The phone's backup data revealed deleted text messages, call logs, and calendar entries. Sabrina had been careful, but not careful enough. The deleted messages painted a clear picture. Sabrina to Clara, 3 weeks ago. "Need your advice. Things with N are getting serious. What if G finds out?" Clara to Sabrina. "He won't. You deserve to be happy. When's the last time G even noticed you?" Sabrina to Noel, 2 weeks ago. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday. When can we have our own place?" Noel to Sabrina. "Soon. I have something special planned, trust me. Gavin printed everything, organizing it chronologically. There were references to meetups at hotels, a cabin rental in the Coast Range, and something called the Cottage Project. Noel's architectural firm, Mercer Design, specialized in high-end residential work. He'd apparently drawn up plans for a private retreat. The most damaging messages were from the past week. Sabrina to Clara. N showed me the plans. It's perfect. Says we can disappear there whenever we want. Clara to Sabrina. What about Jasper? And G's not stupid. Sabrina to Clara. Jay will be fine. G's so wrapped up in work he barely knows we exist. By the time he figures anything out, it'll be too late. Gavin leaned back in his chair, processing the scope of the betrayal. This wasn't a fling or a moment of weakness. Sabrina and Noel were planning a future together, with his money funding their escape. The cottage wasn't just a romantic getaway, it was an exit strategy. He spent the rest of the day researching Noel Mercer. 45 years old, divorced once, owned a successful firm specializing in sustainable architecture. His Instagram was full of hiking photos and pictures of expensive meals. He drove a Tesla and lived in a downtown condo worth $700,000. But there were cracks in the facade. Mercer Design had been struggling lately, losing contracts to larger firms. Noel's personal spending seemed to exceed his business income. He was leveraged, probably desperate for a big score. Gavin's phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. Working late again, don't wait up. He drove home and found Jasper in the kitchen making a sandwich. Hey, Dad, heard you were sick today. Better now, how was school? Same, Mom said she'd be late again. Jasper took a bite of his sandwich. She's been working a lot lately. Yeah, the nonprofit keeps her busy. Gavin studied his son's face. You okay with everything? I know we haven't been around much. Jasper shrugged. It's fine. I'm used to it. But Gavin could see the loneliness in his son's eyes. Sabrina's affair wasn't just destroying their marriage. It was abandoning Jasper, too. That night, while Sabrina slept beside him, Gavin stared at the ceiling and planned his next move. He could confront her directly, demand explanations, threaten divorce. But that would give her time to prepare, to spin the narrative, to claim he was neglecting his family. No. If 18 years of marriage had taught him anything about Sabrina, it was that she always had a story ready. She'd managed her public image carefully, cultivating relationships with donors, community leaders, and politicians. Green Future Northwest had a sterling reputation under her leadership. She'd make him the villain, the workaholic husband who drove his wife into another man's arms. Gavin had a different idea. The next morning, he installed a small digital recorder in the air vent above their kitchen table. The device was designed for wildlife monitoring, virtually undetectable and capable of recording for weeks. If Sabrina was going to plan his destruction, he wanted documentation. He also began mapping her schedule more carefully. The late meetings happened twice a week, always on nights when Jasper had gaming sessions with friends. The timing was deliberate. Sabrina knew exactly when she could disappear without raising suspicions. A week later, the recorder paid off. Sabrina had invited Clara over for coffee, and their conversation was illuminating. How long do you think you can keep this up? Clara asked. As long as necessary. Noel's almost ready to make his move. His divorce settlement comes through next month, and then we can start fresh. What about Gavin's money? The house? Community property. I'll get half of everything, plus spousal support. Gavin makes good money, but he's not exactly exciting. The judge will see that I sacrificed my career for the family. Clara laughed. You've got it all figured out. I have to. This is my one chance to be happy. Noel understands me in ways Gavin never could. We're building something real together. What about Jasper? He'll adjust. Kids are resilient. Besides, Noel's great with teenagers. He coached his nephew's soccer team. Gavin listened to the recording 3 times, memorizing every word. Sabrina wasn't just cheating. She was planning to financially destroy him while portraying herself as the sufferer. She'd already decided that Jasper would be collateral damage. Time to change the game. Gavin's first target was Green Future Northwest's funding structure. As Sabrina's husband, he had access to financial documents she'd brought home over the years. The nonprofit relied heavily on private donations and government grants, all meticulously tracked for tax purposes. But Gavin noticed something interesting in the expense reports. Sabrina had been billing personal meals and travel as business expenses, probably to free up cash for her affair. The amounts were small individually, but they added up to several $1,000s over the past year. More importantly, Clara worked as Green Future's part-time bookkeeper. She had access to the organization's accounts and donor information. If Gavin could prove financial irregularities, It would destroy Sabrina's reputation and eliminate her support network. He began his attack carefully, methodically. First, he created a fake email account and sent anonymous tips to 3 major donors, suggesting they might want to review Green Future's recent financial reports. He included specific dates and expense categories that looked suspicious. Next, he used his access to Sabrina's computer to modify several grant applications, inserting subtle errors that would raise red flags with government auditors. He made the changes look like Clara's work, using her login credentials. Finally, he contacted Tony Billick, Green Future's largest private donor and a city council member. Gavin had met Tony at several fundraising events and knew he was married with a spotless public image. "Tony, this is Gavin Lake, Sabrina's husband. I need to talk to you about something sensitive." They met at a coffee shop downtown. Tony looked nervous, probably expecting Gavin to ask for money or political favors. "I've been reviewing Green Future's books," Gavin said quietly. "There are some irregularities that concern me. As Sabrina's husband, I felt obligated to give you a heads up before this becomes public." Tony leaned forward. "What kind of irregularities?" Gavin slid a folder across the table. "Duplicate expenses, personal charges billed as business costs, questionable vendor payments. It adds up to about $25,000 over 18 months. Tony flipped through the documents, his face growing pale. "Jesus, does Sabrina know you're showing me this?" "Sabrina doesn't know I've discovered it. I'm hoping we can resolve this quietly for everyone's sake." "What do you want me to do?" "I think the board needs to conduct an audit. If the problems are as extensive as they appear, Sabrina will need to step down before this becomes a criminal matter." Tony nodded reluctantly. "I'll call an emergency meeting." Gavin shook his hand. "I appreciate your discretion. Sabrina's worked hard to build Green Future. It would be a shame to see it destroyed by poor oversight." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. Sabrina came home that Thursday night in a panic. "The board wants to see me tomorrow. They're talking about an audit." She paced around the kitchen, her composure finally cracking. "Someone sent anonymous complaints to our donors. They think there are financial irregularities." Gavin looked up from his laptop. "That's terrible. Do you know what they're referring to?" "I have no idea. Clara handles most of the bookkeeping. Maybe she made mistakes. I'm sure it's nothing serious. You run a tight operation." But Sabrina wasn't reassured. She spent the evening on the phone with Clara, reviewing financial records and trying to identify potential problems. Gavin listened from the next room, satisfied to hear the growing desperation in her voice. The board meeting was a disaster. Tony presented the evidence of financial irregularities, and several donors demanded immediate action. Sabrina tried to blame Clara, but the electronic trail clearly showed both women had accessed the questionable transactions. By Monday, Sabrina was on administrative leave pending a full investigation. "I don't understand how this happened," she told Gavin that night. "Clara swears she didn't make those errors. Someone's sabotaging us." "Who would do that?" "I don't know. Maybe a competing nonprofit or someone who wants to take over the board." Gavin nodded sympathetically. "I'm sure the truth will come out." But he was already planning phase 2. Noel Mercer's architectural firm was built on relationships and reputation. In a city like Portland, where the design community was small and interconnected, one major scandal could destroy a career. Gavin had been studying Noel's work for weeks, identifying vulnerabilities. Mercer Design's biggest current project was a mixed-use development downtown worth $15 million. The client was a real estate investment group with ties to the city government. Using his access to public records databases, Gavin discovered that Noel had submitted similar designs for multiple projects, sometimes copying elements from other architects without attribution. It wasn't technically plagiarism, but it would raise questions about originality and professional ethics. More importantly, Noel had been cutting corners on structural specifications to reduce costs. The shortcuts weren't illegal, but they violated industry best practices. If the right people knew where to look, they could find problems. Gavin called his friend Mike Torres, who worked for the city planning department. "Mike, I need a favor. There's a development project downtown that might have permit issues. Could you take a closer look at the structural plans?" "Which project?" "The Mercer Design mixed use on 3rd Street. I heard some concerns about the foundation specifications." Mike owed Gavin a favor from the previous year when Gavin had helped resolve a power grid problem that could have delayed a major city project. He agreed to review the plans. 3 days later, the city issued a stop work order on Noel's project. The foundation specifications didn't meet updated seismic requirements, and the electrical systems had potential fire safety violations. The delays would cost the developers millions. Noel's phone started ringing immediately. Angry clients, concerned investors, and competing architects who smelled blood in the water. By Friday, he'd lost 2 additional contracts and was facing a lawsuit from the mixed-use developers. Sabrina came home that night looking exhausted. Noel's having problems with his business. The city shut down his biggest project. That's unfortunate, Gavin said. What happened? Permit issues. Someone filed complaints about safety violations. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Between my work situation and his problems, we're both under incredible stress. Maybe this is a wake-up call. Sometimes these challenges bring couples closer together. Sabrina looked at him sharply, as if trying to detect sarcasm, but Gavin's expression was perfectly sincere. Yes, she said slowly. Maybe it is. Phase 3 required more direct action. Gavin had been tracking Sabrina and Noel's movements for weeks, documenting their patterns. They met twice a week at different hotels, rotating locations to avoid detection. But they always chose places with convenient parking and minimal security. On a Tuesday night, while Sabrina was supposedly at a crisis management meeting, Gavin followed her to the Heathman Hotel downtown. He parked across the street and waited. Noel arrived 20 minutes later, using valet parking. He looked nervous, constantly checking his phone. The pressure from his business problems was clearly affecting him. Gavin had prepared for this moment carefully. He wore dark clothing and a baseball cap, carrying a small bag of equipment. The hotel's parking garage had limited surveillance, and he knew the layout from previous reconnaissance. He slipped into the garage and located Noel's Tesla. Using a device he'd borrowed from work, officially for testing electrical meters but effective on car electronics, he installed a small GPS tracker under the rear bumper. The device would record everywhere Noel went for the next month. But that wasn't the real plan. Gavin also placed a small recording device in the hotel's main lobby, disguised as a lost cell phone charger. The device would capture audio from anyone sitting in the nearby seating area. Then he called the hotel's front desk from a payphone. This is Detective Morrison with Portland Police. We've received reports of possible pill activity involving guests in your hotel. I need to speak with your security manager immediately. The call was transferred twice before Gavin hung up, but it was enough to make the hotel staff nervous and more attentive to unusual behavior. 30 minutes later, hotel security approached Sabrina and Noel in the lobby. Gavin watched through the windows as they were questioned about their presence in the hotel. Nothing came of it. They had every right to be there. But the interaction was awkward and embarrassing. More importantly, it made them paranoid. Over the next 2 weeks, Sabrina became increasingly suspicious and defensive. She changed her schedule unpredictably, took different routes to work, and started checking her car for tracking devices. I think someone's following me, she told Clara during one of their recorded kitchen conversations. Yesterday, I saw the same car behind me 3 different times. Maybe you're being paranoid. With everything that's happening at work. No, this is different. Someone knows about Noel and me. They're trying to destroy us systematically. Clara sounded worried. What are you going to do? I don't know. Noel thinks we should stop seeing each other until things calm down. Maybe that's smart, but Sabrina's voice hardened with determination. No, I'm not letting whoever's doing this win. Noel and I deserve to be happy. We've worked too hard to give up now. Gavin smiled as he listened to the recording. Sabrina's paranoia was making her reckless, exactly as he'd hoped. When people felt cornered, they made mistakes. The mistake came the following weekend. Jasper was staying at a friend's house Saturday night, giving Sabrina a rare opportunity for an extended rendezvous with Noel. Instead of their usual hotel meetings, they decided to visit the cottage Noel had been building for their future. Gavin had discovered the property weeks earlier using the GPS tracker and public record searches. It was a small cabin on 40 acres in the Coast Range, about 90 minutes from Portland. Noel had purchased the land through a shell company and was building the structure himself, probably to avoid creating a paper trail. Saturday afternoon, Gavin drove to the property and scouted the location. The cabin was isolated, accessible only by a narrow dirt road. Perfect for privacy, but also perfect for his purposes. He parked a quarter-mile away and hiked through the woods, carrying a backpack full of equipment. The cabin was small but well-designed, with large windows facing west toward the mountains. Solar panels on the roof provided off-grid power. Gavin had brought several recording devices, but he decided on a more direct approach. Using skills he'd learned in the Army 20 years earlier, He positioned himself in the tree line with a telephoto camera and directional microphone. Sabrina and Noel arrived at sunset, carrying bags of groceries and a bottle of wine. They looked relaxed for the first time in weeks, finally free from the stress and surveillance they'd been experiencing in the city. Gavin photographed everything: their intimate dinner by candlelight, their conversation on the deck about their future together, their passionate encounter in the bedroom with windows they'd forgotten to cover. But the most valuable moment came near midnight, when they sat on the deck planning their next moves. "The investigation at Green Future will blow over," Noel said, his arm around Sabrina. "These things always do. You'll be back to work in a month. What about your business problems?" "I'll rebuild. Maybe this is a good time to start fresh anyway. We could relocate, open a firm somewhere new." Sabrina leaned against him. "What about Gavin and Jasper?" "Gavin will be fine. He's got his job, his routine. Honestly, you'll be doing him a favor. When's the last time he showed any real interest in you?" "You're right, but Jasper's 16. In 2 years, he'll be in college anyway. Kids adapt. He might even prefer living with his dad." Sabrina was quiet for a moment. "I feel guilty sometimes, like I'm abandoning my family." "You're not abandoning anyone. You're choosing happiness. You've spent 18 years taking care of everyone else. When do you get to live for yourself?" Gavin lowered the camera, having heard enough. Sabrina wasn't conflicted about betraying her family. She was rationalizing it. Noel was encouraging her to abandon Jasper without looking back. Time to end this. Monday morning, Gavin called in sick again and drove to the offices of Stevens & Associates, Portland's most aggressive divorce attorney firm. He'd researched them carefully. They specialized in complex asset division and had a reputation for ruthless tactics. "I need to discuss divorce proceedings," he told the receptionist. "Specifically, I need advice about protecting assets when a spouse is engaged in financial fraud." The consultation lasted 2 hours. Gavin presented evidence of Sabrina's affair, her embezzlement from Green Future, and her plans to take half his assets while abandoning their son. "This is extensive," said Jennifer Stevens, the senior partner. "You've documented everything carefully. When do you want to file?" "Not yet. I want to make sure Sabrina can't claim spousal support or take custody of Jasper." "Is there a way to prove she's an unfit mother?" Stevens smiled coldly. "Given what you've shown me, I think we can make a compelling case. But timing will be crucial. We need to file before she can establish a narrative of being the sufferer." "How long do I have?" "If she's planning to leave, probably not long. These affairs usually reach a crisis point quickly. She'll either end it and try to save the marriage, or she'll make her move." Gavin thanked Stevens and scheduled a follow-up meeting for the next week. But he wasn't planning to wait for the legal system to deliver justice. Sabrina had chosen war when she decided to destroy his family. He intended to win decisively. That evening, he called Tony Billick. "Tony, we need to talk again. I've discovered additional problems with Green Future's finances. This goes deeper than we thought." They met at the same coffee shop. This time, Gavin brought a larger folder of evidence. "I found records of payments to a shell company owned by Noel Mercer. It looks like Sabrina was using non-profit funds to pay for personal expenses, including construction costs for a property they're developing together." Tony's hands shook as he reviewed the documents. "This is embezzlement. We'll have to contact the district attorney." "There's more." Gavin pulled out photographs from the cabin. "Sabrina and Mr. Mercer have been using nonprofit resources to fund their personal relationship. The cottage was built with money meant for environmental programs." "Jesus Christ, how much are we talking about?" "At least $50,000, possibly more." "The forensic accounting will determine the exact amount." Tony sat back in his chair looking sick. "The board will lose their minds. This will destroy Green Future's reputation permanently." "I'm afraid so. But there's another problem." Gavin leaned forward conspiratorially. "I think Clara Daniels was helping them. She had access to all the accounts." "Clara, but she's been with us for 3 years." "I know. It's disappointing. But the electronic records show she was involved in moving money between accounts, creating false vendor payments, things like that." Tony nodded reluctantly. "What do you think we should do?" "Fire them both immediately. Turn everything over to the authorities. Try to recover as much money as possible." "What about Sabrina? She's your wife." Gavin's expression was perfectly calm. "My wife made her choices. I won't let her destroy an organization that does important work just to fund her affair." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Wednesday. Gavin made sure to be out of town on business, giving himself an alibi while the bombs exploded. Sabrina called him Tuesday night, hysterical. "They're firing me. The board thinks I embezzled money to pay for some property with Noel. It's insane." Slow down. What exactly are they claiming? They have bank records showing payments to some company Noel owns. They think we were using nonprofit money for personal expenses. Gavin feigned shock. That's ridiculous. Why would Noel's company receive payments from Green Future? I don't know. Maybe it was for consulting work or architectural services. I don't handle every transaction personally. What does Clara say? Clara's not answering her phone. I think they fired her too. This sounds like a misunderstanding that got out of control. Can you prove the payments were legitimate? I'm trying, but all the records are at the office and they've locked me out. Gavin let her vent for 20 minutes, offering sympathy and support, but internally he was satisfied. Sabrina's professional reputation was now in ruins. No other nonprofit would hire her after embezzlement allegations. Thursday morning brought worse news. The district attorney's office announced they were opening a criminal investigation into Green Future Northwest's finances. The story made the local news, with reporters camping outside Sabrina's office and their home. Sabrina hid in the house, afraid to go outside. Her phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, former colleagues, and concerned friends. She looked haggard, desperate. "I need to call a lawyer," she told Gavin. "This is getting out of control." "Good idea. Do you want me to ask around for recommendations?" "No, I'll handle it." She hesitated. "Gavin, I need to tell you something. About Noel and me?" Gavin looked up from his laptop, expression carefully neutral. "What about him?" "We've been close, maybe too close. I think someone's using our friendship to make me look guilty." "How close?" Sabrina started crying. "I made a mistake. I got lonely and Noel was there and things went too far. But I never stole money. I would never do that." Gavin got up and put his arms around her, playing the supportive husband. "It's okay. We'll figure this out together." But he was already planning the final phase. Friday afternoon, while Sabrina was meeting with her lawyer, Gavin drove to Noel's office. Mercer Design occupied a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and modern furniture. Very Portland. Noel looked terrible. His business was collapsing, his name was in the news connected to embezzlement, and his reputation was destroyed. He was drinking scotch at 3 in the afternoon. "Mr. Mercer? I'm Gavin Lake, Sabrina's husband." Noel's face went white. "Look, whatever you think, relax. I'm not here to fight. I want to talk." Gavin sat down, uninvited. "I know about the affair. I know about the cottage. I know about the money. I never asked Sabrina to—" "Stop." Gavin's voice was calm but commanding. "I'm not interested in your explanations. I'm here to offer you a deal." Noel poured himself more scotch. "What kind of deal?" "You're going to disappear, leave Portland and all contact with my wife, and never come back. In exchange, I won't provide the district attorney with additional evidence that could send you to prison." "What additional evidence?" Gavin pulled out his phone and played audio from the cottage recording. Noel's voice filled the office. "Gavin will be fine. He's got his job, his routine. Honestly, you'll be doing him a favor." Noel's hands were shaking now. "Where did you get that?" "I've been watching you for months. I have photographs, audio recordings, financial records. I know about every hotel you've visited, every lie you've told, every dollar you've stolen." "I didn't steal anything. The cottage was built with nonprofit money. You used Sabrina to funnel cash through fake consulting contracts. That's wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy." Gavin leaned forward. "The feds take that very seriously." Noel finished his scotch. "What do you want?" "I want you gone. Tonight. I want a signed confession admitting you manipulated Sabrina into the embezzlement. And I want you to transfer ownership of the cottage property to me." "That's impossible." Gavin played another recording, Noel's voice describing how he'd convinced Sabrina to approve payments to his shell company. "The DA would love to hear this. Proves premeditation." Noel stared at the phone. "You fool. You planned all of this. You planned to destroy my family. I'm just returning the favor." It took 2 hours, but Noel eventually signed everything. The confession letter, the property transfer, a statement admitting he'd seduced Sabrina as part of a scheme to embezzle nonprofit funds. By evening, he was driving out of Portland with his remaining possessions packed in his Tesla. Gavin called Tony Billick from his car. "Tony, you'll be interested to know that Noel Mercer just left town. But before he did, he provided a full confession of his role in the embezzlement scheme." "What do you mean?" He admitted that he manipulated Sabrina into approving fraudulent payments. Apparently, he was using their relationship to gain access to Green Future's accounts. Sabrina was a sufferer, not a perpetrator. Tony was quiet for a long moment. Do you have this confession in writing? I do, and I think the district attorney will find it very interesting. What about the cottage property? Noel transferred it to me as part of his restitution. He knew he couldn't keep assets purchased with stolen money. Saturday morning, Gavin presented the confession letter to Sabrina over breakfast. She read it 3 times, her expression shifting from confusion to relief to something approaching hope. He admits he tricked me into approving those payments. He says I didn't know they were fraudulent. That's what it says. But why would he confess now? Gavin shrugged. Guilty conscience. Maybe he realized his lies were destroying innocent people. Sabrina started crying again, but this time with relief. I thought my life was over. The board, the DA, everyone thought I was a criminal. Now they'll know the truth. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Gavin, I need to tell you everything. About Noel and me. About the mistakes I made. Not now. Let's focus on clearing your name first. But Gavin knew Sabrina would never get her reputation back. The confession might prevent criminal charges, but the scandal had permanently damaged her credibility. No major nonprofit would hire her. Her donor network was gone. Her professional life was over, and she still didn't know about the divorce papers Jennifer Stevens was preparing. Sunday evening, Jasper came home from his friend's house and sensed immediately that something had changed. The house felt different, tense in a new way. Dad, is everything okay? Mom's been weird all weekend. Your mother's been dealing with some work problems. It's complicated. I heard on the news about her nonprofit. Kids at school are talking about it. Gavin looked at his son carefully. What are they saying? That she stole money. That she's going to jail. Jasper's voice was small. Is it true? Your mother made some mistakes in judgment. She trusted someone who was using her, but she's not going to jail. What about us? Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air. Gavin realized this was the moment of truth, the decision that would define his son's future. Jasper, I need you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, you're the most important thing in my life. I will always take care of you. That's not an answer. No, it's not, but it's the only answer I can give you right now. Monday morning brought the final revelation. Sabrina woke up to find divorce papers on the kitchen table, along with a custody petition and a detailed financial disclosure. What is this? She whispered, her face going pale. Gavin sat across from her, perfectly calm. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm seeking full custody of Jasper. You can't be serious. After everything we've been through, everything I've suffered, everything you've suffered? Gavin's voice remained level. You mean the consequences of your choices? Sabrina stared at the papers, her hands shaking. I made mistakes, but I was vulnerable. Noel manipulated me. Noel didn't manipulate you into planning to leave your family. Noel didn't manipulate you into stealing $50,000. And he certainly didn't manipulate you into abandoning Jasper. I never abandoned. I have recordings, Sabrina. Hours of them. You and Clara discussing how Jasper would adjust. You and Noel planning your new life together. You literally said he'd be better off without you. The blood drained from her face. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting my son and myself. Sabrina's lawyer had warned her this might happen, but she'd refused to believe it. This is insane. You're destroying our family over a mistake. I'm not destroying anything. You already did that. Gavin stood up. I'm just making sure you can't do any more damage. What about Jasper? You're going to tell him his mother is a criminal? I'm going to tell him the truth, that his mother chose another man over her family, that she stole money to fund that choice, and that she was planning to abandon him without looking back? Sabrina started hyperventilating. I need to call my lawyer. Good idea. You're going to need one. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following month, but Gavin knew he'd already won. Sabrina's reputation was destroyed, her finances were gone, and she had no support network left. The recordings and financial evidence painted a clear picture of a woman who'd prioritized her affair over her child's welfare. But first, there was Clara to deal with. Clara Daniels had been Sabrina's closest friend for 8 years, her confidant and enabler. She'd helped facilitate the affair, provided alibis, and actively encouraged Sabrina to abandon her family. Now she was facing her own professional and legal consequences. Gavin found her at her apartment Tuesday evening, packing boxes. She was being evicted. Her part-time salary from Green Future had been her primary income, and without it, she couldn't afford rent. Clara, we need to talk. She looked up from her packing, her eyes red from crying. Gavin, what are you doing here? I wanted to discuss your role in my wife's affair. Clara's face hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. I have recordings of every conversation you and Sabrina had in my kitchen for the past 6 weeks. I know exactly what role you played. She sat down heavily on a box. Look, I was just being a friend. Sabrina was unhappy. You encouraged her to steal money. You helped her plan to abandon Jasper. You actively worked to destroy my family. That's not, I never told her to steal anything. Gavin pulled out his phone and played a recording. Clara's voice saying, You deserve to be happy. When's the last time Gavin even noticed you? Take what you need and start over. Clara stared at the phone. You recorded us in your own house? My house, my kitchen, my legal right. What do you want? I want you to testify in the custody hearing. I want you to tell the judge exactly how you encouraged Sabrina to abandon her son for another man. I won't do that. Then I'll play the recordings in court. All of them, including the parts where you discuss embezzling money from the community fund you administered. Clara's face went white. What community fund? The Riverside Neighborhood Association Fund. $30,000 that went missing last year. I have bank records showing transfers to your personal account. Those were legitimate expenses. No, they weren't. I've already spoken to the association's treasurer. They're filing charges tomorrow morning. Clara started crying. Why are you doing this to me? I never hurt you. You helped destroy my family. You encouraged my wife to abandon my son, and you profited from it. Gavin's voice was ice cold. Actions have consequences, Clara. He left her sobbing in her empty apartment. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and media attention. The Green Future scandal had become a local sensation, with daily coverage in the Portland Tribune and frequent mentions on local news. Sabrina tried to salvage her reputation by giving interviews, claiming she was the sufferer of manipulation by both Noel and Clara. But the recordings Gavin provided to prosecutors told a different story. She wasn't a sufferer. She was a willing participant who'd gotten caught. The custody hearing was brutal. Gavin's lawyer, Jennifer Stevens, presented evidence methodically. The affair, the financial fraud, the plans to abandon Jasper, the lies, and manipulation. Sabrina's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been coerced, but the recordings were damning. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Gavin received full custody of Jasper, with Sabrina granted supervised visitation twice a month. She was also ordered to pay child support despite having no income. In 18 years of family court, the judge said, I have rarely seen such a clear case of parental abandonment. Miss Lake prioritized her personal desires over her child's welfare in the most egregious manner possible. Sabrina collapsed in the courtroom. Her mother, who'd flown in from Phoenix, helped her to the car while reporters shouted questions. But Gavin wasn't finished. That evening, he drove to Tony Billick's house in the West Hills. It was a beautiful property worth at least $2 million with a perfect view of the city. Tony had built his wealth and reputation carefully over 20 years in politics and business. Gavin, what are you doing here? We need to talk about your relationship with Sabrina. Tony's face flushed. I don't know what you mean. I mean, the hotel receipts, the text messages, the payments from your consulting firm to Green Future that had nothing to do with environmental work. Tony stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Keep your voice down. My wife is inside. I have photos, Tony, from the Marriott downtown 3 months ago. You and Sabrina in the parking garage. Very intimate. Tony's hands were shaking. We were just talking about nonprofit business. Without clothes? In the back seat of your Mercedes? The color drained from Tony's face. What do you want? I want you to resign from the city council. Announce it tomorrow, citing personal reasons. And I want you to make a public statement supporting Sabrina's prosecution for embezzlement. That's blackmail. That's justice. You used your position to funnel city contracts to Green Future while sleeping with its director. That's corruption, misuse of office, and fraud. My career, my family. Should have thought of that before you decided to join Sabrina's web of lies. Tony resigned the next morning. His statement to the press was brief. Personal issues require my full attention. I believe Sabrina Lake should be held accountable for her actions at Green Future Northwest. The scandal destroyed Tony's marriage within a week. His wife filed for divorce after reporters started asking questions about his relationship with nonprofit directors. His consulting business collapsed as clients fled the controversy. By Thursday, Gavin had eliminated every ally Sabrina had cultivated over the years. Clara was facing embezzlement charges and couldn't find work. Tony was ruined politically and financially. Noel had disappeared entirely, reportedly living in his car somewhere in California. But there was one final confrontation to come. Saturday morning, Sabrina appeared at Gavin's front door. She looked terrible, thin, exhausted, wearing clothes that hadn't been washed in days. Her hair was unwashed and her eyes were wild. "Let me see my son. It's not your scheduled visitation day." "I don't care about the schedule. I want to see Jasper. He's not here. He's at a friend's house." Sabrina pushed past him into the house. "I know he's here. Jasper. Jasper, come talk to your mother. Sabrina, you need to leave. You're violating the custody order." She spun around to face him, her composure completely gone. "You destroyed everything. My career, my friends, my life. All because of your wounded pride." "I destroyed nothing. You made choices and I documented them. You manipulated everything. You set me up, you ruined Noel, you blackmailed Tony. I exposed the truth. Everything that happened to you was a consequence of your own actions. I made one mistake. I fell in love with someone who understood me. You made 1,000 mistakes. You stole money. You planned to abandon your child. You betrayed everyone who trusted you." Sabrina started crying, but her tears were angry, desperate. "Noel was right about you. You're cold, calculating. You don't have any emotions at all. I have emotions. I was hurt, betrayed, angry. But I channel those emotions productively. You're a monster. I'm a father protecting his son. Jasper will hate you when he learns what you really did. Jasper already knows what I did. I showed him the recordings, the financial records, everything. He knows exactly who his mother really is." The statement hit Sabrina like a physical blow. "You told him about the affair." "I told him the truth, that his mother chose another man over her family, that she planned to abandon him without looking back, that she stole money to fund her escape. He's 16 years old. He's old enough to understand betrayal, and he's smart enough to recognize manipulation when he sees it." Sabrina sank into a chair, her energy finally exhausted. "What am I supposed to do now? I have nothing left. You could start by taking responsibility for your actions. Stop blaming everyone else for the consequences of your choices. I lost everything. You threw everything away. There's a difference." She looked up at him with pure hatred. "I hope you're happy. You got your revenge. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. You tried to destroy my family for your own selfish desires. I simply made sure you couldn't succeed. And what about Jasper? What kind of father teaches his son that love is something to be punished? I'm teaching him that actions have consequences, that loyalty matters. The family isn't something you abandon when you get bored." Sabrina stood up slowly. "I want to see my son. Call his therapist and schedule a supervised visit. Follow the court order. This isn't over, Gavin." "Yes, it is." She walked to the door, then turned back. "You think you've won, but you've lost too. You've lost your wife, your marriage, your family, and Jasper will never trust you again once he realizes what you're capable of. Jasper trusts me because I protected him, because I chose him over my own comfort. You chose revenge over forgiveness. I chose truth over lies." Sabrina left without another word. Gavin watched her drive away in her 10-year-old Honda, the last remnant of her former life. Jasper came home an hour later, dropped off by his friend's mother. He looked at Gavin carefully. "Was Mom here? I saw her car in the driveway. She stopped by. She wanted to see you." "What did you tell her?" "That she needs to follow the visitation schedule." Jasper nodded and headed toward the stairs, then stopped. "Dad, do you think Mom will ever get better?" "What do you mean? Will she ever admit what she did was wrong? Will she ever say she's sorry?" Gavin considered the question carefully. "I don't know, son. Some people can't face the truth about themselves. They'd rather blame everyone else than take responsibility. Like Mom blaming you for everything that happened? Like that. I used to think you were too hard on people, too focused on rules and consequences. And now? Now I think maybe that's what being an adult means, understanding that choices matter." Gavin felt a surge of pride in his son, mixed with sadness for everything they both lost. Yes, choices matter. That night, Gavin sat in his study reviewing financial documents. The divorce settlement had been finalized, giving him the house, most of the assets, and custody of Jasper. Sabrina would receive minimal alimony for 3 years, barely enough to survive. He'd also received ownership of the cottage property in the Coast Range. Noel's gift to Sabrina, built with stolen nonprofit money, now belonged to Gavin legally. There was a knock on his door. Jasper stood in the doorway holding his laptop. "Dad, I found something you should see." Gavin looked at the screen. It was a social media post from Sabrina, published an hour earlier. "The truth about my marriage. My husband systematically destroyed my life because I fell in love with someone else. He manipulated evidence, blackmailed my friends, and turned my own son against me. I'm not the villain in this story. I'm a sufferer of psychological warfare by a man who couldn't handle rejection." The post had already been shared dozens of times, with comments ranging from sympathy to skepticism. "She's trying to change the narrative," Jasper said. "Make herself look like the sufferer again. People will believe what they want to believe. Aren't you going to respond? Set the record straight?" Gavin closed the laptop. "I don't need to respond. The truth is in the court records, the police reports, the financial documents. Anyone who wants to know what really happened can find out. But people might believe her lies. Some will. Others won't. But it doesn't matter anymore, Jasper. She can't hurt us now. She has no power, no credibility, no resources. She's just noise. Will she ever stop? Eventually. When she realizes no one is listening." 3 months later, Sabrina's social media campaign had fizzled out. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation had failed, partly because new details kept emerging about the scope of her financial fraud. The district attorney's investigation had uncovered additional instances of embezzlement involving 2 other nonprofits where she'd worked previously. Clara had been sentenced to 18 months in prison for her role in the community fund theft. Tony Billick's divorce had been finalized, leaving him with limited assets and no political future. Noel had been arrested in Los Angeles for credit card fraud and was fighting extradition to Oregon. Gavin received updates on all of them through his lawyer, but he felt no satisfaction in their continued downfall. They had made their choices, just as he had made his. Jasper was thriving. His grades had improved, he'd joined the robotics team at school, and he seemed more confident and mature. The therapy sessions had helped him process the trauma of his mother's betrayal, but he'd emerged stronger. "I've been thinking about college applications," he told Gavin over dinner one night. "Maybe engineering like you. You don't have to follow my path. What interests you? Problem solving, building things that matter, making sure systems work the way they're supposed to." Gavin smiled. "Those are good reasons to be an engineer. Is it true that electrical systems fail gradually, then all at once? Usually. Why?" "I was thinking about Mom. Her life didn't collapse suddenly. She made small compromises, little lies, bad decisions that added up over time. By the end, the failure was inevitable. That's very perceptive. I don't want to end up like that. I want to build something solid, something that lasts. Then you will." That weekend, Gavin drove to the cottage in the Coast Range. He'd been renovating the property slowly, turning it into a place where he and Jasper could spend time together away from the city. The work was therapeutic, rewiring the electrical systems, improving the solar array, building a workshop in the basement. Clean, honest labor that produced tangible results. As he worked, Gavin reflected on the events of the past year. He'd destroyed his wife, eliminated her support network, and permanently altered his son's understanding of trust and betrayal. Some might call it justice. Others would call it revenge. The distinction didn't matter to him anymore. What mattered was that Jasper was safe, that their family's assets were protected, and that Sabrina could never again use her charm and manipulation to damage the people he loved. Sunday evening, as they drove back to Portland, Jasper asked the question Gavin had been expecting. "Do you ever regret what you did to Mom?" Gavin considered his answer carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your mother made choices that forced me to act. But I don't regret protecting you. Even though it meant destroying her?" "Your mother destroyed herself, Jasper. I just made sure she couldn't take us down with her. What if she gets help? What if she changes? Then maybe she can build a new life. But it won't be with us." They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the lights of Portland spreading out before them like a circuit board in the gathering dusk. 2 years later, Gavin received a letter from Sabrina. She was living in a small apartment in Eugene, working part-time at a community center. The letter was an attempt at reconciliation, asking for a chance to rebuild her relationship with Jasper. Gavin showed the letter to his son, now 18, and heading to college in the fall. "What do you think?" Gavin asked. Jasper read the letter twice. "She still doesn't take full responsibility. She says she made mistakes in judgment and was influenced by others. But she doesn't admit to planning to abandon me. She doesn't acknowledge the theft or the lies. So what's your answer?" "Maybe someday, when she's ready to tell the truth about what she did. But not yet." Gavin nodded and put the letter in his desk drawer, next to dozens of others from lawyers, reporters, and former colleagues of Sabrina's, all asking for his side of the story, all trying to understand how a respected community leader had fallen so far so fast. He'd never responded to any of them. The truth was in the records. The evidence spoke for itself. Anyone who wanted to understand what had happened could piece it together from court documents, financial records, and news reports. Gavin didn't need vindication or public recognition. He'd achieved what he set out to do: protect his son and preserve their family's future. Everything else was just noise. On a quiet Thursday morning in September, as Jasper prepared to leave for college, Gavin stood in his kitchen drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. There was a small item on page 6 about Clara Daniels, who'd been released from prison and was working at a halfway house in Salem. No mention of Sabrina, Tony, or Noelle. They'd faded from public attention, their stories relegated to cautionary tales whispered in non-profit circles and political backrooms. Jasper came downstairs with his suitcase, ready for his father to drive him to campus. "You ready for this?" Gavin asked. "I think so. Are you ready to have the house to yourself?" "I've been looking forward to the quiet." As they loaded the car, Jasper turned to his father. "I know what you did wasn't easy. The planning, the patience, seeing it through to the end. But I want you to know, I understand why you did it, and I'm grateful." "You don't need to be grateful. I did what any father would do." "No, Dad. You did what needed to be done. There's a difference." They drove toward the university in comfortable silence, the late summer sun slanting through the trees along the highway. In a few hours, Jasper would begin his new life, armed with hard-won knowledge about trust, betrayal, and the importance of choosing the right people to love. Gavin had given his son many things over the years: education, opportunities, guidance. But perhaps the most valuable gift was the understanding that actions have consequences, that loyalty matters, and that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to destroy what threatens it. As they pulled into the university parking lot, Gavin looked at his son, tall, confident, ready for whatever came next, and knew he'd made the right choices. The truth had cost them everything they thought they wanted, but it had given them everything they actually needed.